I spoke with Filip Pietruszewski, owner-operator of CCTV in Victoria, and also Andy March, musician, artist, and maker, about their project, WVR.
I'm Phil. I run CCTV here in Victoria B.C, which is a audio technology manufacturer and repair shop, as well as community space, hosting workshops, and is a source of knowledge for audio technology in general.
I'm Andy. I'm one of the Denzians of Phil's shop. I come from a background in music, and I come from an educational background in fine art. And so I've sort of been morphing more into a maker and a creator in the last few years. And WVR is my first big released thing.
Beautiful. Okay, so we are gathered here today to discuss the production of creativity, which is WVR. And I understand this is a collaborative project, but this was like an idea of yours, Andy, that sort of grew, and the two of you came together because of shared interests and the topics and a lot of different things. So do you guys want to tie into how that started, perhaps, or what exactly WVR is?
It was absolutely the brainchild of Andy. It was his idea initially. I've just been helping him on the way and supporting him how I can. But what was the actual inspiration behind that?
Well, maybe I'll start with what it is. So if you have ever owned an electronic musical instrument, there is going to be something in there that creates the actual sound. It takes whatever you're doing and, you know, makes a bunch of calculations and puts out some noise. And that very last step is kind of a tricky one, because producing actual sound waves is not something that a computer is super comfortable with. It's not really in its range of expertise. So when I went to build my own first musical instrument, I ran into a brick wall of getting it to actually make nice sound.
Nice sounds is the key word.
You can get it to make crappy sounds, no problem. But to get a computer to make nice sounds, or a microchip to make nice sound, is a little tricky. And so I tried to tackle that myself. And as soon as I did, I realized why there wasn't an easy, ready-made, open source project on the market. And that's because it was extraordinarily difficult. And it took me a few years and the sage advice and support of Phil here, without which it never would have happened for sure. But we eventually figured out how to do it. And then we drank a bunch of vodka and celebrated because it had been some long years.
It was a celebratory night. That was amazing when we finally got it working. Wow.
I bet. How about in your definition? Because it's a very subjective thing. What is a good sound and what is a bad sound that's manufactured by a electronic instrument?
Oh. Well, I think in this context, what we're talking about is high fidelity sound, which means a high sample rate and high bit depth. So that's really what we're talking about here. We're not talking about the subjective aspects of good sound versus bad sound. We're talking about high resolution sound, and that's what WVR produces. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
And to go on with the sort of simplified explanation of what WVR is it's a circuit board. It's similar to an Arduino. If you've ever heard of Arduino, it's a circuit board that you can write your own code for. You can play around with. You can develop your own applications, and think of it as like a Lego brick that slots into a larger project that you're working on, and it solves a certain problem that you're facing. And WVR solves one particular problem, but it solves it really, really well.
In my mind, I'm thinking it's like really a small part of the whole that makes up a electronic instrument, but it's like really important. It's like one of those incredible moving pieces. So it's until you actually are getting into it that you realize, oh, I really need this thing and I don't have it. Oh.
Yeah. And it's, you know, I wouldn't even call it a small thing, a small part of the whole. It's more of like the brain. It's like the main part. With this little board here, you could build a sampler. You could build a drum machine. You could build some wacky art that we can't even think of. You could build a wavetable synthesizer of some kind. You could do all sorts of stuff.
Sweet. That's great. That's really cool. So in a way, this is kind of being to answer the question of as to why you would make it. But do you want to extrapolate further why you would make it and what, motivated you to do this?
I mean, I have like a lifelong sort of desire, which I came to when I was very young, to help to try to bridge the gap between human creativity and, the incredible power of technology, and figure out why that sort of marriage wasn't happening at the time when I was a kid. I feel like it's happening better and better. And I was just excited to contribute to that space, sort of human computer collaboration.
Mm.
Sweet. I suppose in a sort of spiraling off in a different direction, because I'm familiar with crosses, I'm familiar with Phil's work, and admittedly, when I think of crosses, though, I don't imagine a lot of electronic musical instruments combined in, even if they're experimental. Maybe I'm just totally getting the wrong impression, or maybe I haven't fully listened to everything. But is there certain things that you have been wanting to make connections with technology and art that just haven't been working, that this is the thing that's going to make it work for you in particular?
I mean, it's funny you should say that, because believe it or not, the last Crosses record is entirely electronic drums, and you wouldn't really know it to hear it. But it is like an earlier prototype of the project that eventually culminated in me having to make the Waver, which is a set of drum pads. And that's our whole last record was actually recorded that way.
That track you just heard was the 2018 release I Got Low off of the Crosses Snakes Split LP. And as Andy said, the drums that you heard on that track were all created on the early Waver prototype. The applications and usability of Waver does not end there, but also includes Wi-Fi and Bluetooth.
Well, really, like what the features of the Waver is that it has 8 gigabytes of onboard, super fast storage. So you can fill this thing up with audio files and play them back. You can layer them on top of each other. And so you can make, a multi-sampled, keyboard instrument or drum machine, but all of them are kind of based around the fact that this has a ton of storage. And so sample playback is really what it excels at. So we have a few different boards that Waver can come with. So we have the Maker board, which comes with an audio amplifier that connects directly to a speaker. It'd be perfect for art installations or anytime you want to prank your roommate and make some kind of sound when you press a button. It's perfect for that. If you want a museum exhibit where a visitor can walk up and press a button and have something play back, that's perfect for that as well. But then we have the Maker board, I believe, dev board, which has some drum pads on it. It has some tactile interfaces on it, knobs and buttons and things that we crave to touch. And it's a great platform to start building something like a drum machine. I've got high hopes for building an SB404 clone at some point. I'd love a modern take on that SB404 kind of form factor, but those are just pipe dreams. I need to put in the work to make that happen. But that's kind of what it's just a really good sample playback board.
Cool.
I come from a background in a bit of web development and native app development. Cool. And one really neat thing about the Waver is the fact that it has Wi-Fi. And that's something that no other sort of sound chip on the market currently has. And the reason that's so exciting is because if you've ever worked a drum machine or a modern synthesizer, you know what menu diving is. You have a tiny screen and you're trying to set some setting, and you have to spend 5 minutes punching through menus and turning little knobs to try to tweak a setting or change a configuration value. And what the Wi-Fi opens up for musical instruments that it's powering is the ability to connect with your phone or your laptop. And using that Wi-Fi connection, you can both upload the sound files, which is often a real pain in the neck, and you can also open up a web browser and have an interface there, like basically a web page open up there that will give you control over any variable or menu setting that you might want to set. So it basically, I'm hoping that it heralds in a new era of never having to have a menu or even have a screen necessarily on your synthesizer. You can just open up your phone, change some things, put your phone away, and the settings are changed. It also opens up the possibility for combining multiple instruments together over Wi-Fi for streaming, or that whole world of audio streaming and
syncing.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that that you thought of that and that you said that, because admittedly, how do I say this? I guess I'm just going to be really candid and honest. When you guys were talking about this, I immediately was thinking, how do you see what you're putting on it? I guess you need to put it into a box, and I'm just not really that tech savvy to understand that little step, because I immediately thought, yeah, I've been looking for a sampler, but I don't know how I would put it into that cool little piece of, little microchip, this little, computer brain.
Right.
But that is really mind-blowing, and that is incredibly appealing, the fact that you can have that synced over Wi-Fi and see it on a larger screen on your phone or on your computer. That is
like, if you've ever seen the Teenage Engineering OPZ, which is their newest synth, I think it came out a few years ago, but it's like a gray slab with no screens, but just rows of buttons, right? And you need to remember all these button combinations. But you download like the companion app, which connects to it over, I think, Bluetooth. And it opens up a whole world of possibilities with this unit, where you can actually use it to sample video or actually manipulate animation on in that app.
Wow.
And that I feel like that's where technology is going. Like, we're all carrying 4K displays in our pockets that we already own. So why are we stuck with these little 64 pixel displays on our musical instruments? So opens up some possibilities.
That actually makes me the question, why did you choose Wi-Fi over Bluetooth? Because I know there is differences, and some people prefer one over the other, but there's got to be reasons for developing too.
I mean, it actually has Bluetooth as well. But I
okay.
actually really don't like Bluetooth. It's a complicated, in my opinion, bloated protocol. There's tons of security built in. And the reason I picked Wi-Fi is because the web browser is an amazing interface that people already know how to manipulate. So when the end user of Waver goes to try to design their user interface, they can hire their web dev friend to build them a website with all the controls on it, rather than have to build like a native Windows application or something crazy that you'd have to use for Bluetooth.
Right, I see that.
But there is Bluetooth on it, so I've actually never even turned it on, just because I'm allergic. All the trying to pair nightmares that I've experienced in my life. Really, it's a lot of baggage, and I don't want to go there quite yet.
We have Bluetooth anxiety disorder.
Some more Bluetooth therapy before I can dive into that.
Oh, that's great. The only reason I ask, and I do use Bluetooth, and part of my reason is that I don't always have Wi-Fi access. I don't have a data plan. I'm using quote unquote Lucky brand phone access, and so I don't have a data plan. So I'm always using
great beer.
They do, right? But they also make great SIM cards too. Who knew, right? Cigarettes, SIM cards, and beer. Right? So I'm super frugal, and also I don't know, I'm like that. So I'm always accessing Bluetooth because of it. But I understand there are a lot of security issues, and there are problems with it. But
the interesting thing is, most of the time when you think about Wi-Fi, you think about connecting to a local Wi-Fi network. And Waver doesn't require that. It is basically a router built into it. Yeah. So you choose it in your Wi-Fi list, and you're directly connected.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be in Wi-Fi or have any passwords or anything like that. You just connect to it, and
it's also a web server. So the web page that you use to change the parameters of Waver or to transfer your files over, that is all hosted on the chip that's on Waver. So it broadcasts its own Wi-Fi network and it hosts its own web page. So it's all self-contained. You don't need to download anything. You don't need to connect to the internet and go to some web page and then type in some codes. You just connect, you load up a web browser, and you're done.
That is really sick. And I really see the appeal of being able to manipulate a web browser for making your own, controls versus having to make a program, like you were saying. That is so clever. And it's so
web design is just so much easier than any other web design.
Yeah. That is really, really cool and super innovative and very inspiring. And it's all so neatly compact. Hold it up again. Let's see it. It always blows my mind.
This is the basic.
That's
part.
The Waver.
So it's as small as possible.
That is great.
This is the most luxurious. This is the Royal Dev board. It's giant and has
just a prototype
everything
model.
On it.
Yeah.
That's luxury.
And it's got those pads on top. And then there's
this is the in-between one that's more for like installing maybe in a smart speaker or in a drum machine. It's kind of halfway.
It's got some connections on it already. Yeah.
Oh my God, that is so cool. Yeah, I'm appreciating it now that I understand better myself, right? I thought it was cool to begin with, but like understanding these other nuances, and probably other people that are tuning in, they're like, yeah, this is cool. I knew it from the start. What is this? This is sick.
Why all those Waver hipsters, right?
Cool. Yeah. Oh man, I guess, quarantine was good to you, right? Some time to contemplate and be creative.
Yes, this was definitely a quarantine killer.
You spend enough time alone, you'll have at least one good idea.
Totally. Sometimes people need to take a break from the regular way we do things and the way we, I guess, take for granted our time, and we can just take some time to like, what really matters to me? Waver does. I'm going to work on this for 8 months. That's what I'm going to do.
That is true.
More than material and monetary ambitions, Andy and Phil are looking towards the growth of a collaborative open source community around Waver.
Where it's at now, I'm really looking forward to building a community around it, because I have never really been part of an open source community, but from the outside looking in, it looks like it could be a really great sort of collaborative environment that I'm hoping that people jump on board. There's a couple people that contacted me through the Kickstarter campaign that sound like they might turn into contributors. But I think that's my main goal, apart from, seeing all the wacky stuff that people build with it and maybe building some wacky stuff myself.
Oh yeah.
I guess that's the other half of it.
Sweet. Yeah, that's scary though. Like hoping that the community takes this project forward and runs with it is like a really fills me with anxiety. If nobody contributes any projects to this, I'm going to be really sad. But also I personally am just excited about the projects I could build with this unit, because I already have a ton of ideas that this would be perfect for.
Yeah, I mean, I made it because I needed it to exist, so at least that much is satisfied.
That aspect
come out on top no matter what happens.
I'm actually having a bit of a brain fart, which is embarrassing, but I was when you were saying community and when you were talking about it fulfilling, what it's fulfilled. Oh, it's gone. Oh, fuck. Anyway, I should have wrote that down. Brain fart moment. But I think that's really cool. And I think that's really wholesome. And also, in a way, the only way for something to grow, you have to have more involvement to, see the different applications of it, to even maybe get other ideas for yourself and ways you want to develop it further. That actually thankfully brought that back. Tip of the tongue theory. Never think about the thing you've forgotten, only just talk around it. I wanted you guys to talk a bit about the Kickstarter and how that went for you, and how'd that go?
It was a long haul. There's a lot of details, and I'm not great at finishing things off. I'm really good at getting started. I'm really good at brainstorming. I'm good at getting about 60% of the way. I can make it to 90 without killing myself, but to get to 100 is really hard. And like having Phil to help me, having my friends like try to keep me accountable to finishing it off, and especially the help of my friend Dale, who produced the video, which was definitely the lion's share of the esoteric labor of making a Kickstarter. Couldn't have done it without her. Definitely couldn't have done it without Phil. Yeah, it's probably been 8 months of picking away at filling out a million spreadsheets for them, like making sure all the pictures are just so. And I don't know, I'd do it again, but it wasn't easy.
Yeah, but that's a example of your work is paying off big time. So congratulations.
Yeah, I'm happy it paid off.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And that's the way you can move forward and, make this accessible to everybody and the community at large, and potentially work towards future projects. That's really exciting. When I saw that, I was super impressed, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is really cool. We got to talk about this.
Thank you.
If you've become inspired from hearing about the many uses and applications of Waiver and would like to incorporate Waiver into your creative repertoire, as well as collaborate in the open source community, there are ways you can.
Okay, so there's 5 levels of purchasing power that you can take part in Kickstarter in. The basic one is just the Waiver chip, which if you have a breadboard or in any way involved in DIY electronics, that's all you need. You can actually it has touch sensitivity pins, so you can actually just like tap the Waiver itself, and then it'll, like, there's a video in my Kickstarter of me doing that.
And it has a micro USB port on it, so you just power it from your computer or a phone charger or whatever, a power brick of any kind.
Yeah. And then it has another similarly sized backpack, which is what I call the sort of like modular add-on package, of which there's only one, and that's this USB one. So you can put these together back to back like that, and they make a funny little module, and you can plug this can host your MIDI instrument. So I could plug my keyboard into this, and the Waiver would power the keyboard, or electro drum set, or MIDI theremin,
launchpad, or whatever. Yeah.
And so
MIDI theremin.
That's step 2. Then there's this one called the Maker's Board, which is sort of for people who just don't really want to fuss around. It's got all the plugs you would need. It's got like a typical 9-volt adapter, and then a 1/8-inch stereo output, and then it's got little solder pads for the speaker outputs.
And it's got a speaker amplifier. It's got a 6-watt Class D amp on board.
And it's got a big amplifier built in. So you could sort of imagine hiding this in your sculpture and just not having to worry about it, plugging some speakers into it, and your sound project is done.
Sweet.
Then if you're really keen, there's the dev board, which is meant for people who really want to dive into building their own instrument or whatever plans they have for this device. It's got all kinds of different ports. It's got this wacky patch bay of pin headers here, so you can directly access each pin. And then it's got all these peripheral switches, knobs, encoders, buttons, touch pads, etc., for you to sort of experiment with. It's got LEDs, it's got an RGB LED, sort of all the things in the kitchen sink are on this one, so that you can really dive deep.
It's like a Waiver playground.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, there's LEDs. You
always
mean business when
swing
there's LEDs.
set, monkey bars.
That's really great. I also appreciate how you have different levels of experience and knowledge regarding how to actually utilize the beauty of this little secret brain that can be hooked up to things.
Yeah. And there's also the Thames, right?
Oh, of course. The most important one is, I don't actually have it here, but it's like a guitar pedal.
Yeah.
It's the whole thing built into a guitar pedal with some
it's like the modular, the USB backpack, but in a case. So it's ready to go. So if you're looking at Waiver specifically to play back samples using a MIDI keyboard or a MIDI controller of any kind, one of the Kickstarter rewards was one of those fully contained in an aluminum box with power connections and a paint job and all that.
Yeah. So that would be for like the person who is already a musician and they just want it because there isn't really anything like that on the market currently. for some reason. I don't know why this doesn't exist yet, but
Well, sometimes people take what is made accessible to them at face value and they don't question it. And they're just like, hey, this is good enough. I'm not going to try.
Yeah, they're all sheep.
Sheep. It's
I'm just
true.
joking.
They're sheep. We can drop that one. They're just auditory sheep. That's what this is.
Auditory sheep. That's a good band name, actually.
Auditory sheep. Yeah, that sounds like the start of something. Yeah. They must use Waver in their band because that's
of course
that happened during this conversation.
I feel like auditory sheep would use all Behringer. Sorry, I don't think I'm allowed to say that on radio. I might get sued.
You're not allowed to say that on radio. I don't know. I've said some interesting things, and I think I'll get away with that. So I think you could get away with that one.
I don't know. Yuli might hear it and sue me. I gotta be careful.
Well, that's true. So cautiousness. If you'd like me to cut that one out, I can put a loud beep right there. So no problem.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. I usually
Yuli doesn't listen to campus radio.
It's true. Are they? Okay, this has been really great. I have really enjoyed chatting with you guys about this. Congratulations. I'm sure you both have heard that from like tons of people, but you have totally impressed me, dazzled me with what you have created over the last.
That's so nice. Thank you.
No, it's true. It's true. I love.
So excited to be on the radio.
Pardon?
I said I was so excited to be on the radio with this. Yeah,
oh, that's great. Well, that's really. I would assume that radio was like old hat for yourself and for you.
As if
no.
Especially CFUV.
I don't know. I love radio. Oh man.
I think it's more fun when you have to chase down your station on an actual analog radio itself.
Yeah.
It's even more fun. Like, oh, I found it. It doesn't suck. Sweet. Yeah. It's not like religious hour or, for those that want that, that's great. But you know what I mean? But yeah, thank you for coming on and chatting. Any final thoughts that I haven't, managed to wisely target in talking with you guys? That's always a tough one because when it's thrown at people, they're like, no.
I know.
I guess if anybody out there in Radioland is a developer that wants to get involved, I would be so happy to hear from you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah.
That
we
reminds
need more brain power.
Yeah, more brain power. This reminds me though, because people can hear this. Like, how do I contact these two guys? I know one has that shop and the other one's in that band, but how can I follow up? Is there an email for Waver or contacting either of you specifically about this? Is there what?
Well, do you have a Waver email?
The company that we have together is called Ultra Palace, and you could follow us on Instagram and contact us that way. That's probably the best one.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, cool.
Ultra Palace. Yeah.
Spell that one out because sometimes people cannot always recognize how to spell it because of all the
ULTRAPALACE.
Perfect.
Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Sick.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna follow that later. I haven't been on Instagram for about 4 weeks, so that's a good reason to go on. And yeah, please follow them, get in touch, and if you've got a cool idea, want to be involved, contact and do that. Thank you guys so much. This has been really fun.
Thank you for having us. This has been fun.
Yeah,
no problem. And as this progresses, I'll stay in touch, and I'd love to chat again if there's something crazy that happens or if there's a further development. I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll keep you in the loop
anytime.
I'm forever impressed by the creativity and the inventiveness that exists within our beautiful Victoria art and music scene. Be sure to stop by and say hi to both Andy and of course Phil over at CCTV, since they are there very frequently, as well as give Andy's music a listen if you haven't heard of Crosses already. Be sure to follow Ultra Palace on Instagram for updates about Waver, as well as go ahead and check out the Kickstarter for Waver to find out more details as Andy was outlining. I want to thank both Andy and Phil for chatting with me about their wonderful creation, and I look forward to the development of a collaborative open source community around Waver. The track that you've heard throughout this interview was a improvised, spur of the moment creation that Phil and Andy created just for this interview on Waver. you.